What is up, guys? Frosty Aussie here today with another Frosty Features. Today we have another member of our Absolute A-Force team. This is Ms.Marvel Classic. We do have Ms.Marvel already in the game, but she came before Frosty Features started, so here we are covering her here today. If you haven't been to a Frosty Features before, what this is a comic book background on the toons that you use in Marvel Strike Force, and I'm gonna take you through the pages past. So, with that, let us begin. According to Scopely, what this is the blog post description of the character that is given. When Scopely announces a new character, they give us this and then what they do in the game. So this is the lore that we are presented with. I will read it and rate it at the end of the feature. So, Ms.Marvel Classic. Carol Danvers was a courageous Air Force pilot when she found her life forever changed after being caught in an explosion involving Kree technology. Her DNA was fused with that of the alien Kree race, causing a transformation that granted her incredible powers, including superhuman strength, flight, and energy absorption. Embracing the name Ms. Marvel, Carol took on the responsibility of protecting Earth, battling threats from across the cosmos, while inspiring others with her resilience and bravery. So, that is the description that we were given by Scopely. We will rate that, as I said, at the end of the feature. But for now, this is Ms.Marvel Classic. Alright. Name, Carol Danvers. So, as a reminder, as we go through this, it's very important. Not so much in this one, I guess, but we pull our information from the Marvel 616 universe. This is the main comic book continuity. First appearance, Marvel Superheroes number 13, all the way back in 1967. Carol Danvers is a major character in the Marvel Universe, especially after the Ms. Marvel or Captain Marvel movie released. So she has a lot of stuff to cover, so I'm only gonna hit a little bit. She's been around for a long time, therefore, and she's also had many monikers and stuff like that. We'll hit most of them, but just be aware there's a lot to cover, so I'm not covering all of Carol Danvers' history. I am just talking about a couple of very specific things here, namely trying to focus on her time as Ms. Marvel. Power/ability, superhuman in every way. Super speed, super strength, super reflexes, etc. Flight plays very big into some of the stories we tell today. Energy projection, so she can absorb energy, shoot energy blasts, turn it or absorb radiation, turn it into different types of projectiles, fire. It really kind of depends on when you're reading Carol Danvers. Ultimately, she's very powerful. She is imbued with cosmic power. It's not cosmic awareness, but she does kind of filter power from space, I guess. But very, very, very strong character, right? That's just something. That's the end of it, right? As she is portrayed in every way, that's just what we get. Aliases, Binary, which is what I first met her as, Captain Marvel, obviously, Warbird, and Lady Marvel, right? All those besides Ms. Marvel. Affiliation. So all of once again, a character that's been around since 1967, especially one that has been in the spotlight for as long as Carol Danvers has. She has had many, many, many affiliations. So the most notable that I wanted to point out, Avengers. Everybody's in the Avengers. A-Force, she's in Absolute A-Force in Marvel Strike Force, so that's important to point out. Alpha Flight, it's another really interesting one. This is kind of a short period of time, but very important time in her story. And then the Ultimate, which we will talk about a little bit today. But essentially it's the Illuminati 2.0. Background, Bostonian. So, Carol is a half-human, half-Kree hybrid who was born in Boston, Massachusetts to a Kree warrior mother and a human father. Who died? Marvel. So, you can't be a superhero or supervillain without somebody dying. In this case, for Ms. Marvel to take on, to get her powers, to take on the Captain Marvel, to take on the Ms. Marvel moniker, we see the death of Marvel. It's Marvel at first, and then it becomes Captain Marvel, and it's a whole thing. We'll get into it. But ultimately, yes, that person had to die for Ms. Marvel to find out who she was and actually kind of be that next level. Name and Kree. So her Her name is Carol Danvers, but her name is actually derived from Kree origins from her mother, so it's Kar-El. So Kar-El translates as champion in English. So she was destined for greatness at birth. The seventh sense. This is another really interesting. This is debatably a power that Carol Danvers has. We mainly see it in early Carol Danvers stories. So when we're Miss Marvel, when we're namely when we're Miss Marvel, and maybe Binary a little bit. But the seventh sense essentially is the spider sense. She gets a bit of precognition to be able to see what's going on, so it helps her avoid danger. It very much is the spider sense, but referred to as the seventh sense. But after she becomes Captain Marvel, I don't know if they got rid of it, but I don't think they reference it as much. But she references it a lot as she's Miss Marvel, so that's something important to consider. So, do we spawn with a dodge chance? No. Should we? Absolutely. Relationships. So, Marielle and Joe Danvers Sr. are her parents. Joe and Stevie Danvers are her human brothers. She has a Kree half-sister, Lori L. And then Marcus Immortus, we're going to talk about him a little bit. Not technically her son, but she gives birth to him. So, is her son? Question mark? One of the weirdest ones that we've definitely come across Frosty features as far as whether or not they're actually related, but he does birth him, so there's that. So from there, we're gonna move on to notable events. So we're gonna talk about the origin of Carol Danvers. So as I stated before, she is born in Boston to a human father, Joe, and a Kree warrior mother who has deserted the Kree way and decided to try to live a normal life on Earth. But her husband is an alcoholic and becomes very abusive. And so Carol is in essentially what is referred to as a very out of date household, where essentially the idea is you shouldn't do anything with your life. You need to live in the kitchen, right? Women are supposed to be in the kitchen, etc. And she's like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. I'm Carol Danvers. I'm going to excel at everything, and you're just gonna have to get screwed, Dad. So she ends up leaving her home and joining the United States Air Force, where she rises through the ranks. She's very intelligent, very brave, etc. So she ends up being able to test out. And this is actually a retcon, by the way. She is able to test out experimental jets and things like that. So she ends up working on some of Tony Stark's experimental planes. So this is a retcon, but the retcon feeds into itself. So that's the end of the retcon that I'm going to talk about. As she goes through the United States Air Force, she ends up excelling in rank, becoming a major. And then she actually gets a job at Cape Canaveral, being their chief of security. So at Cape Canaveral, this is where she ends up finding Dr. Walter Lawson, which is hold on one second. Oh, that's right. Who is Marvel, right? So that's Marvel's like first, or that's his like secret identity. In meeting him, she's inadvertently introduced to Captain Marvel's. The OG Captain Marvel, his nemesis, which is Jan Rog. So Jan Rog, in an attempt to get at Captain Marvel, finds out who he is, etc., and captures and kidnaps Carol Danvers. So recognize, even though she is half human, half Kree, she has no powers at this point to like be spoken of, right? So she is kidnapped by Jan Rog, and as Captain Marvel comes and saves her, whatever, but in this time, she's exposed to the Psyche Magnetron, which this essentially pours some radiation into her. She's in proximity to this machine. She gets irradiated, and it enacts, it enables, it shoots on her Kree genes, and she develops her first powers, which include superhuman strength, reflexes, flight, etc., and light energy projection. But she doesn't get it right away. She kind of figures it out over time. So as she returns back to Earth, this is when she takes on this moniker of she takes on the moniker of... It's Ms. Marvel. Yeah, no, it's Ms. Marvel. But she's dressed like Captain Marvel. It's not the costume we got in game. She's dressed very similar to Captain Marvel as like an ode to Captain Marvel. But at first she's Ms. Marvel, and she's Ms. Marvel for years and years and years. And actually, after this, she quits her job at Cape Canaveral, and she becomes a famous novelist and writer. And through this, meets people like J. Jonah Jameson and Mary Jane Watson. And then we see her, she actually develops this dual personality where she has a human personality of Carol Danvers, and then her Kal-El, which somebody in chat pointed out it's Kal-El. It's very similar to Superman, but it's Kal-El, so it sounds Carol. But so essentially there's like these split personalities. So her Ms. Marvel personality and a human personality. And so the human personality is writer, the other one is the superheroine, and it sort of starts to kind of totally super encase her life, and she is essentially very constantly going out and doing these things. So eventually what happens is she figures out how to sort of merge these personalities into one. So she is more stable, essentially. And then we have Ronan the Accuser, who we've talked about many times in Frosty features, and to have a very outdated character in-game who's worth nothing in Marvel Strike Force. Ronan the Accuser shows up, and he's like, oh, this Kree warrior that's here has a divided personality. I can take advantage of that and therefore control the world. Little did he know that Carol had fixed this problem on her own, and she beats the living crap out of him. So from this, we have a team up with the Avengers, and we see Carol Danvers working with the Avengers a lot. And then the Wasp comes to Captain Marvel and is like, hey, that Kree guy really tried to screw you over there. Are you sure you want to dress like a Kree representative? Because that's Captain Marvel's situation is a Kree suit. And Carol's like, yeah, maybe not. So the Wasp is like, I'll make you a new suit. It's going to be awesome. That's how we get this suit here pictured on our slide. That's how the design in game is based on this suit developed by the Wasp, which is thematically beautiful because this Absolute A-Force team does in fact include the Wasp, which is super cool. So we finally get some actual, not that Absolute A-Force is a team necessarily that I'm aware of in the comic book lore, but them two having a relationship, them two being on a team together is very lore appropriate. Big thumbs up from Frosty Offty on that end. We don't say that much here. So with this, she ends up leaving the Avengers, and she's essentially trying to make her own way. It's kind of how a lot of people, they get into the Avengers, they sort of like excel their status, they kind of obtain this new identity, and then they leave. So currently she's Ms. Marvel. So what ends up happening is this situation with Marcus Immortus. This is the one I was talking about where I said son, question mark? So Immortus, which is old Kang, is in an extra dimension, and he has a son that he names Marcus Immortus, and outside of this dimension, they're like, well, we need to be reborn into this actual dimension. So essentially plants this seed, this idea, and then Immortus has a situation where he controls a woman and essentially makes her his wife, like pulls her out of her dimension into their dimension. Essentially they can pull from but not go to, right? So Immortus ends up leaving, dying, whatever. Marcus Immortus is like, I'm gonna do the same thing my dad did, and he mind controls Carol and puts Carol into his dimension, makes her his wife, and then essentially impregnates her with him as a seed. So his seed as him, and then she goes back to Earth, and she essentially has a baby in a manner. It's like, I think it's 3 months. She grows and has a baby, and the baby rapid ages to all the way up until the age in which Marcus Immortus is supposed to be. And at that point, his spell or whatever love thing also still pulls over Carol. A very, very much Jessica Jones Netflix show, Killmonger and, Kilgore, David Tennant, Purple Man, David Tennant and Jessica Jones relationship, very much that. So, they are a thing. Marcus tries to pull some stuff, and the Avengers stop him, even though Carol's helping. They both return to the other dimension as a retreat method, and then Marcus Immortus rapid ages to Ash, and Carol Danvers finds a way back home. She gets back home, and she's like, you know what? all the stuff I've been going through. I need to be my own person. Everything has changed. My life has been really weird. So anyway, she becomes binary. And eventually she becomes, she loses her powers. So that's another big thing with Carol Danvers, is we see her, her running into situations. So as she becomes Warbird, she, working on her own, she ends up working with the X-Men a lot. This leads her to run into early Rogue, when Rogue was evil, the Rogue that is pictured behind my head here. When Rogue is evil, and Mystique. And Mystique hits her so hard that she starts to kind of forget who she is. And then in a fight with Rogue, she loses her powers altogether. And that's a whole story. I think we talked about it in Frosty Features Rogue way back in the day, so definitely check that out. But ultimately, she loses her power. She becomes a regular human being. And eventually, she gets exposed to more cosmic radiation, whatever. And that gives her kind of excess power. And that's when she switches from binary to Warbird. And when she becomes Warbird, she stays Warbird for a very long time until eventually she does elect to don this costume pictured again and become Ms.Marvel once again. So the next thing we're going to talk about as far as notable events is the legacy of Captain Marvel. So Captain Marvel was a 1960s very prominent, very prominent Marvel character. Very much drove the Marvel space age in the 60s and 70s. So we actually don't see Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel until 2012, which is now 13 years ago. But in the span of comic book history, that's actually quite a ways. So she only really donned the mantle of Captain Marvel just a few years before the movie came out, which is pretty interesting. But so she ends up being in a situation where. So Avengers vs. X-Men happens, which is a really cool thing to read, watch, whatever. Which the Avengers vs. X-Men essentially comes over. Hey, there's this child. She is born. She's gonna become the next Phoenix. The Avengers are like, we're gonna have to kill that. We're gonna have to kill that baby. And the X-Men are like, we're not gonna kill that baby. And they fight. So with that, the return of the Phoenix Force comes. So with this, the Phoenix Force is kind of moving through so the Phoenix Force is the essence of life in the universe, and it's the fire of life, right? That's, so there is a level of destruction to it, because life, death, cycle, etc. Traveling very much like Galactus, right? Phoenix Force travels around, whatever, and way back on the Kree homeworld, we have a situation where the Phoenix Force goes to the Kree world, and Mr. Marvel, who is a different guy, scientist, he is like, okay, well, we need somebody to protect us. I'm gonna resurrect, using the proximity of Phoenix Force. I'm going to resurrect Captain Marvel, who originally died of cancer. So they bring back Captain Marvel. Once again, Carol Danvers is still Ms. Marvel at this time. So they resurrect Captain Marvel to be able to defend themselves against the Phoenix Force, and Carol Danvers ends up on the Kree homeworld to try to help, and Captain Marvel, the resurrected, he is like, okay, well, to save my people, I'm going to sacrifice myself, and in sacrificing myself, I'm going to cancel out the Phoenix Force and live. So Carol Danvers watches this, and watches Captain Marvel give up his life and succeed in taking out the Phoenix Force, or stopping the Phoenix Force. You can't kill the Phoenix Force, but essentially sending it back to the White Hot Room, essentially. So she watches it, and she is so taken aback by the action and the self-sacrifice that Captain Marvel took on, that she is inspired to put back on. So like I said, her original garb was very similar to Captain Marvel's. So now she actually puts on the Captain Marvel uniform that we know, and takes on the moniker of Captain Marvel, not to represent the Kree, but represent the spirit in which Captain Marvel, the Kree, represented and fought for. So she's kind of embracing both her human and Kree heritage, and being Captain Marvel for real. And that's where we have it. Too many in chat. Somebody said too many Marvels. Yes, absolutely. There's Marvel, there's Carol, and then there's Mr. Marvel. And Mr. Marvel's he's a Kree scientist. And then Captain Marvel, his name is Marvel, which is how they get Captain Marvel, etc. It is confusing, but that is what it is. That's kind of the legacy that we have here. We do with this mantle being taken up. Carol goes through a lot of things, working with Guardians of the Galaxy, working with Avengers, working with Alpha Flight, all these things. She really started appearing more in comics, especially around the Civil War era. Civil War 1, she takes the side of Iron Man. But one of the big things, and she's actually one of the main driving forces for Civil War 2, if I remember correctly. So eventually what we have is she runs into Yon-Rogg again, who appears as like, oh, you're Captain Marvel now, huh? Let's see how that works. She also, because of some previous things, she ran into essentially a disorder where a superhero doctor was like, hey, the more you fly, the more you're gonna lose your brain. Like you're literally gonna, your brain's gonna explode if you keep doing this. Stop doing it, chick. And she's like, yeah, I can't stop doing that. I'm a superhero. So eventually she has a mind break and forgets who she is in space, which is a huge deal. But because of this, Yon-Rogg's like, this is a perfect time to invade and take her out. But she's still able to, without her memories, was able to take out Yon-Rogg, which is coming for the fact that she's Captain Marvel, and she's able to take out Yon-Rogg and gets her memories back. I wanted to point that out because I said this is legacy. So the other thing, the legacy bit, the Ms. Marvel we know, especially before Ms. Marvel Classic came out in Marvel Strike Force, is Ms. Marvel Kamala Khan, right? So how does this work? Well, after Avengers vs. X-Men, we see the emergence of a team called the Illuminati. The Illuminati are the assemblance of the world's smartest people, etc. And so what they're doing is they're killing realities to make sure that the 616 can stay safe, which is ethically bad. Very bad. So what happens here is essentially the realities come together, and all the realities are like, well, if they're going to start killing off a whole bunch of people in these different realities, we're going to stop them. So all the heroes in all the realities are all fighting the 616. So we're having Captain America's fight Captain America's, etc., etc., etc. And throughout this, in this fight, we have Kamala Khan meeting Carol Danvers, Kamala Khan being a big Carol Danvers fan, basing a lot of her stuff off of her, and even taking on the moniker of Ms. Marvel without the permission of Carol Danvers. But with this, after the big war ends, the Illuminati are disbanded. A team called the Ultimates are put into place, and what they're doing is restoring a lot of these realities and trying to heal the multiverse, as it were. And throughout all of this, Kamala works with Carol. Carol names her as her successor as the name for Ms. Marvel and gives her blessing to use the name. So legacy for Captain Marvel, legacy for the name Ms. Marvel. These are what legacy heroes are, and the passing on of it is just such an important aspect of the character. So there's that. So next up, power level. In Marvel Strike Force, they don't care about power levels, but here in Frosty Features, we do. Now, the way that this works, if you are a multiversal threat, then you are a threat to not just your reality, but all realities as it is. You can take out the multiverse as it stands at a whim. Universal means you are strong enough to take out your reality, maybe then hop on over to another one and topple that reality and keep on hopping, right? Cosmic means your power level is that to where you can, on the small end, take out small planetary bodies, all the way up to being able to level things like solar systems or even small galaxies. Nuclear means you have power equivalent to that of a nuclear bomb, being able to level things like small cities all the way up to that small planetary body with enough time and effort. Super Soldier means that you are beyond all human capabilities, period. Absolutely no chance. Here we have superhuman strength, reflexes, etc., but also being able to take out things like a brick wall all the way up to a city block with enough fight, enough pain and power, right? City means that you are equivalent to that of a human being that is trained to the utmost utter peak of human ability, very similar to an Olympic athlete level. In Marvel, this is where we have a lot of ninjas, mercenaries, agents, secret agents, things like that. And there's Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that's spawned by Hela in Marvel Strike Force, and without the Undying team or anyone else to back him up, Greg isn't worth anything. So, in the event that I'm on a road trip, personally, me as a regular human Frosty, go on a road trip and we're going to see the largest ball of twine, and I get the courage, even though there's a sign that says not to touch the ball of twine, I want to touch the ball of twine. But Turns out the guy who owns the ball of twine, or company, I didn't do any research on this ball of twine, I'm just riffing, he hired a security guard, and it's Greg. So Greg takes a swing at me with his axe. But lo and behold, I brought my own fencing equipment, and Greg and I have a fight to the death, and I, as a regular human being versus this undead Asgardian physiology, theoretically, by my argument, could beat Greg, and does in this situation. So for the sake of this Frosty features and all the other ones, we are saying Greg is equivalent to that of a regular human being, right? Just the average, your average Joe, if you were, the average Greg. So, in the case of Carol Danvers, we have an extremely powerful individual being able to level things like cities easily, right? Very large energy projections, very much on a similar level as Thor, even being able to tangle with the likes of Thanos by herself. Not necessarily winning against Thanos, which firmly cements her in this cosmic level. Her powers also do not extend beyond that of a cosmic level, so being able to destroy something like a planetary body is definitely in the conversation, but bigger than that is really, really, really difficult to kind of, whereas Thor might, especially with the Odin Force, Thor can kind of push past that, but I think personally, Carol Danvers is right at the cosmic level, maybe like one step. Like if there's 10 levels in Cosmic, she's Cosmic 1.5. So she's right at that level. Could be even lower, honestly. There's an argument to be made that she's high-end nuclear. But we're going to go Cosmic, namely because she does also have Cosmic influence and things like that. We don't normally take influence into consideration. But her power level is so borderline that I think it's important to give her the benefit of the doubt on this one. And as far as the coding to Scopely goes, it's been a long time since we had a blog post like this. This one, they got it twisted. They didn't even try. Okay, so they use the MCU story of Captain Marvel in here. This is what happens, what they describe happens in Captain Marvel, but she does not take on the moniker of Ms. Marvel. She takes on the moniker of Captain Marvel. So they took it's like somebody watched the movie, didn't read anything, and was like, she's gonna be Ms. Marvel, so we'll just put it there. Bam, MCU, or MSF lore, right? So they got it twisted, they mixed two things together, and it was not well thought out whatsoever, and it really doesn't, because then how does she become Captain Marvel? Because in that lore, that's when she becomes Captain Marvel. There is no Ms. Marvel in between in the MCU. So they actually just jump a gap here, and there is no Captain Marvel. So they betray their own lore. So for my fellow content creators that want to say that MSF has their own lore, this is an example of them betraying their own lore, right? Unless they designated this as a different universe, Carol, which they have not. They are designating as their own. So this is them contradicting themselves. Comic books do it all the time. It's not that big a deal, but here we are. So that was Frosty Features Ms. Marvel Classic. I hope that you all enjoy it. Please let me know in the comments your favorite Ms. Marvel or Captain Marvel, Binary, Warbird, whatever, Carol Danvers moments in the comments, or if I got anything wrong, I'd love to hear it. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe here on YouTube. It doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks. As a reminder, I stream 8 a.m. Central Standard Time at the link above where we do Frosty Features live. I hope that you all enjoyed this. I hope that you all have a fantastic, fantastic weekend. Most importantly, y'all,